You flip through a seed catalog and see promises of massive harvests. But for most backyard gardeners, planting a small raised bed quickly results in an overgrown jungle where vines choke each other out and the actual harvest is frustratingly small. The mistake usually happens on day one. Beginners take traditional agricultural instructions, specifically the row spacing printed on the back of seed packets, and try to force them into a tiny 4x4 raised bed. Efficiency in a constrained space is a strict calculation of the square footage required, multiplied by the time it takes to reach harvest, measured against the total usable yield. Standard row planting breaks this math. It was designed for tractors and large-scale farming, meaning it requires empty pathways. In a raised bed, applying row spacing leaves highly valuable dirt completely empty. To get a meaningful harvest from a small space, you have to abandon row spacing entirely. Every inch of soil needs to be evaluated for its return on investment. This is where square-foot gardening comes in. It is a spatial strategy that forces you to measure your garden by area, not by lines in the dirt. The mechanics are simple. You take a standard 4x4 raised bed and visually divide it into a strict grid of 16 individual sections, each exactly 1 square foot. By isolating a single square, your planting density is dictated entirely by the physical area the mature crop requires. You look at the seed spacing number on the packet and ignore the row spacing. This is high-intensity gardening in practice. The layout packs plants tightly to form a living canopy, crowding out weeds and maximizing water in the soil. But creating a layout like this forces a choice. Since your space is strictly capped at 16 squares, you have to decide what productivity looks like for you. Are you looking for rapid, continuous harvests, or are you trying to grow structurally massive crops? That is the central trade-off of the small space garden. You can optimize for volume, or you can optimize for velocity. You cannot have both in the same square. Let's evaluate the first category, fast turnovers. These are cut-and-come-again leafy greens: lettuce, kale, spinach, and arugula. This matrix breaks down the requirements. For greens, the spatial input is highly efficient, packing 4 to 16 plants per square foot. Labor requires consistency. Frequent harvests of outer leaves stimulate new growth. The outcome is a continuous daily yield, starting weeks after planting. The velocity here is unmatched. Instead of waiting months for a single fruit to ripen, you get a steady, reliable supply of fresh food directly to your kitchen. But there is a trade-off. These crops have low total caloric weight, often yielding just 1 or 2 pounds over their lifespan. And once the summer heat hits, they tend to bolt, turning bitter as they shift energy to seed production. Leafy greens maximize harvest frequency. They provide a constant supply of fresh food, even if they don't provide a high volume of calories. Next, we have the single batch strategy, root vegetables. This covers carrots, radishes, beets, and turnips. Returning to the matrix, inputs for underground crops are front-loaded. You seed them densely, 16 per square foot, but must strictly thin seedlings early so roots can swell. The outcome is predictable. A grown square yields a ½ pound to a pound of dense food. But root vegetables carry a hidden temporal cost. To eat them, you rip the plant from the soil, instantly ending its productivity for the season. The trade-off is garden downtime. Every time you pull a carrot, you create an empty, unproductive square. You have to immediately replant new seeds and then wait weeks for the next batch to mature. You get reliable, solid weight from roots, but you pay for it with temporal dead zones in your garden's timeline. Finally, we reach the volume strategy, heavyweights. These are fruiting plants like tomatoes, eggplants, and squash. Looking at the matrix, the inputs here are massive. A single plant requires 1 to 2 full square feet of real estate. They demand vertical infrastructure like heavy trellises and continuous pruning to maintain airflow. You also have to navigate plant genetics. You choose between indeterminate varieties, endlessly climbing vines producing all summer, and determinate varieties, growing into a compact bush and dropping all fruit at once. If you manage the infrastructure correctly, the payoff justifies the effort. The outcome is massive volume. A single healthy tomato plant can yield 10 to 15 pounds of fruit over a season. But dedicating so much time and space to a single root system is a gamble. Your trade-off is risk. A heavyweight ties up a large percentage of your 4x4 bed for the entire summer. If a pest or disease strikes that one plant, a massive chunk of your annual yield disappears. If you fall behind on pruning, these plants behave aggressively. A single unmanaged vine can rapidly sprawl out, smothering the neighboring squares in your garden. Heavyweights provide the highest total poundage possible, but they require you to actively manage plant architecture and monitor for system-wide risks. So, with your 16 squares mapped out, which crop actually fits your constraints? We map these decisions on a simple quadrant chart. We track effort and infrastructure on the y-axis against harvest style on the x-axis, from a steady daily drip to one massive haul. Prioritizing speed and low maintenance, you plot in the bottom left. Cut and come again greens require low infrastructure and provide a steady drip of food. You need zero carpentry skills, no trellises, and you eat almost immediately. Space-constrained optimizers belong in the top left quadrant with indeterminate tomatoes. This gives you a steady drip of food but requires high effort. Assuming you put in the labor to prune and tie the vines vertically, this is mathematically the highest poundage per square foot you can achieve. If your goal is preserving, someone who wants to can salsa or a free soup, you plot in the top right with determinate tomatoes and bush squash. These bush varieties require space and cages, but they drop their massive yield all at once. They are optimal for processing large batches of food without the daily structural pruning vines require. Finally, if you want low effort but a big haul, you plant root vegetables in the bottom right. You plant the seeds, wait, and pull up your batch. The math makes one thing very clear. There is no universal most productive crop. There is only the crop that perfectly matches your tolerance for building infrastructure, doing the physical labor, and waiting for the payoff. Before you buy seeds, look at your constraints. Don't plant heavyweights in a 4x4 box without vertical support structures. They will fail. Conversely, don't plant an entire raised bed of leafy greens if your motivation is replacing bulk calories on your grocery bill. You will be disappointed. A productive small space garden is won or lost on paper, long before a single seed touches the dirt. Define your return on investment first. Choose between velocity and volume. Once you know exactly what you want out of those 16 squares, then apply the math to the soil.